Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we are really excited to have some folks, Paul Isaacs and friends, coming to join us in the second hour to talk from Sound Devices about their new digital receiver, their wireless receiver, the A20. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about the product. It's probably not something that all of us would buy, but the technology is really cool. So you definitely want to see it. So I'm super excited about it in the second hour. So stay tuned for that and do a little research. You can go to Sound Devices. It's on their front page. I know we didn't give you very much time to plan for it because we couldn't say anything. So it's released. It was released yesterday or announced yesterday, and so go check their website out. Think about questions. Think about what you want to know about that product. We have the people to talk to about it in the second hour. So definitely take advantage of the time. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. Our first question is in from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. Using the Insta360 link with a M2 MacBook Air, Zoom use works fine. When using Microsoft Teams, I don't see my video as with other cameras, a Brio, FaceTime, iPhone 11 Pro. Does anyone have issues and suggestions with using Microsoft Teams and the Insta360 link?
I haven't heard of any issues. I haven't actually used the 360 link with Teams, but I haven't seen any specific issues. I think that you may want to check to make sure that your Insta360 app isn't opened at the same time, and just see if that works, and see if it's somehow only when it talks to the app. We've heard that happens with PCs. Have not seen that happen with Macs in other areas, but it may be for some reason these two interlink in a certain way. Go ahead, Courtney.
At least on Windows, yeah, you're right. It does have that problem. If you have your preview image open in the app, there is a button in the lower left corner of the app that you can turn off, at least on Windows. Maybe it's the same in the Mac software, where you can turn off the preview in the window of the control software. So you still have the controls. You can pop up and control the camera, but you can't preview it in the app. And once you turn off that preview in app, then I think it makes that makes the video feed available to other things like Microsoft Teams. Maybe has that issue.
It's an odd thing to have happen because it doesn't happen, with anything else that any other camera, and it definitely doesn't happen with Zoom. So it may be some way that Teams is doing it.
I think what the problem is in just playing around with the app is the app, the controls over the camera, zoom in, zoom out, drag the image left or right to move the gimbal left or right. It pans and tilts by just dragging the image in the preview. So whenever the mouse is over that image, it hands over control to the Insta360. And so I think it may have something to do with that. And if you have it open in multiple things, it won't know when your mouse is over the image.
Well, what's interesting is
so maybe it has something to do with sending the PTZ controls to the camera itself.
Yeah, it's not a standard UVC control. So, it has standard UVC controls. So we have seen apps that manage UVC controls can do basic management of the camera, but it has a lot more tools. It'd be really interesting to know. Because I don't see any issue when I have that open and I'm going into Mimo Live or I'm going into Zoom. I don't see any issue at all, any flickering, any change. It seems to be, but to your point, Teams could be doing something very specific to that process. Go ahead, Serge. Can't hear you. Can't hear you, Serge. Oop. Oh. Okay. Next question.
From John Nichols in Concord, California. Do you have a favorite way to create waveform videos from an audio file? DaVinci Resolve is preferred, and I'm okay with Premiere or Final Cut.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Unfortunately, the two I prefer are Motion and After Effects, and between those two, After Effects is just slightly better for our needs, and that's if you're doing pre-rendered video files. If you want to do it in real time, check out VDMX.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the thing is, there are so many tools out there that will take an audio waveform and display it in so many things that I think this is almost a matter of aesthetics more than it's a matter of getting it done. There are plenty of things that will do it. In the 2 music videos that we did, I took a capture of literally the original video board settings and used the meters as a visual element. In the second one, Virtual Insanity, I did a capture of an aesthetic thing and doubled it and made that part of the visuals. What I'm saying is that there's so many options for getting real-time audio and captured that it's really not difficult. Just decide what you're doing.
Good, Mitchell.
Well, Jesse, I agree that After Effects certainly works. I know that from experience. And if you're using Premiere, you can use that as an what they call an essential graphic inside of Premiere. Other than that, I think Premiere has a plug-in for it. I may have seen it one time or another, but yeah, it's a cool effect.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I use an app called Sound Visualizer, which is a program that takes the audio that's coming through your computer, and you can set it up to do a variety of visual, from just straight waveforms to Lissajou patterns to a variety of, those freaky things that were in the 60s to visualize sound. And it works pretty well. I've used it on shows.
Yeah, there's a lot of real-time visualizers. If you're looking for plugins specifically for Resolve, there's one called Reactor, and Reactor will actually it's a little bit of GitHubby, so it's a little geeky. But Reactor you can install into Resolve, and it will do the waveform the way you want it to do it, and you have some controls over it in that area. The other one that you can do, the one a lot of us build, if you just want levels. So if you want a waveform, Reactor works well. If you want levels to show, what you can do is basically create basic rectangles or whatever shape you want, and you can attenuate their height, their Y value by a certain frequency. So you can basically clamp those frequencies, and you can do that in any app. So you're connecting, and you would do that most likely in Fusion. By the way, Reactor is a Fusion plugin, not a plugin. But you can in any app you can attach the volume of a certain frequency to the height of a square or a rectangle, and they'll all bounce. And that's how a lot of us build them. And then you can warp them to go do it in a circle. You can do a lot of other things that way. So those are kind of the more straightforward ways to actually create something that is modifying something that at full resolution that's actually in the app. Next question.
From Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, is there a record player that plays 33, 45, and 78 RPM records and has smart home technology at a reasonable price range?
Mitchell?
This is a cultural clash here, especially if you got 78 involved and smart home. I'm not sure, but back in the old days of turntables, I used to have, I think it was called a Rabco. It was a turntable that had a arm that just like a T that would track across the record. I think that's the only way that you could take control of the tracking of a record. A standard swing arm, I think that's going to be hard to automate.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and I'm going to say be careful doing this. A 33 RPM needle that is designed to play LPs is a very sensitive instrument. It's a very tiny little armature down there in the end of the capsule. To put a 78 RPM record, which is designed to go many times faster and has much bigger swings to it, and run it through that same needle and cartridge combination may destroy it. So be careful.
Yeah, the only one that I've seen, I haven't used it. The only one that I've seen go by is the Love Turntable, loveturntable.com. It looks like a little spaceship that you put on top of your record. I doubt it'll do 78. I think 78 is probably an edge case, but I think it will do at least 33. That's that one you may want to take a look at. But again, it looks like a little spaceship that you put on top of it. I don't know if I'd put it on any record that I cared about, but it does seem to have most of the features that you're looking for as far as wireless. I think it's still in pre-order. Also, there's a Stir It Up wireless turntable. And again, with a lot of these, I don't know if I would start with records that I cared about. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, there is one out there that does laser to scan the waveforms in the turntables. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you could digitize it. To get back to the last question, you could be flying like it's through the Death Star. You could be flying. You could if it could laser manage the cuts, then you could build a 3D model of it, and then you'd be flying through the music. That'd be really fun. All right, Courtney. I expect to have that animation, Mitchell, next week. Courtney.
And if you've got some old Edison diamond discs, like the player that's over my shoulder there, be careful because those are 80 RPMs, and you will destroy them if you play them on conventional 78 with an old 78 needle. You will destroy them.
Next question.
From Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Any hockey fans in the room? What do you think about the NHL's new digitally enhanced dashboards, where the physical ads on the boards are replaced in the broadcast with different graphics for each market? And how do they do it?
Go ahead, Serge.
How they do it, I don't know. It seems to be like an ATEM or a more advanced device that takes control of the image. The problem is sometimes the leaking of the jersey with the edge of the image. It's getting difficult to see where the player is, where the board is, and where the puck is. I'm not sure it was production ready. They went to it because obviously money was a big incentive for the ads, but it's the future. I think it's going to be better for the long run, but for now, I don't know if anybody else on the panel did see it beside myself.
I haven't seen it. I mean, this technology is not new. This is they've been doing it in baseball, basketball, soccer, and for quite some time. The big thing that happened when it first came out is everyone got really upset because the sponsors had paid a lot of money to the venue to make sure that but here's the tricky part. They hadn't explicitly, they didn't know it when the technology began. This technology has been in testing since the early 90s. I mean, I remember them doing the demo for us when I was working at Prime Sports Network. And the funny thing is and we knew it was the future, and they were showing us ads everywhere and all the places they could put them. But what was interesting was the original contracts never explicitly said they couldn't be digitally replaced because no one thought that you could no one thought of digital replacement. So they were sponsoring things. They get their logo in a certain part behind, but they're obviously paying attention to where the camera shots are. And then suddenly when all those ads got replaced by other ads, people got really upset. They spent millions of dollars on this. And so there was a big fight in the 90s and in the 2000s. And, it's been, and so then what had to happen is a lot of the, because the problem is the venue's making a lot of money in that area, but the broadcaster is taking that money essentially away from the venue, so it becomes a really complex, sticky issue from a political perspective or from a business perspective. As far as the technology, what typically happens with most of these technologies, and I actually don't know how hockey is doing this, but the typical way that this gets done is that you have to calibrate the cameras. So there's not the wide cameras. Generally are calibrated so that they're only doing pan, and typically the ones that have the ads replaced only are doing pan and tilt. And so they're pan and tilting, they can calibrate that so they know what the distortion would be. And so basically they can lock pixel for pixel. And this is how the same technology is used for how they put the first down line in football and those types of things, is they can lock those cameras and make the mathematical calculation on where all that stuff has to go. The second piece is they have to do the difference key, so they have to find those colors that are there. It's a lot easier with like football, American football, because it's green, and that used to be a problem with like green outfits and so on and so forth. It used to be a harder problem, but now it's gotten the technology has gotten so good that they can usually, as Serge said, there will be some bleeding for some outfits, but it's gotten really very, very effective. But it's basically calibrating the certain cameras that are going to do the replacement to the field, and that happens before the game, and then they're able to insert those. But you'll notice that they're not doing it with everything, although we're starting to see them do it even with. Well, I think it can be done with other cameras now. The technology keeps on progressing. Go ahead, Serge.
Regarding that, the point. In hockey right now, it's just the main camera. It's just the main angle that's got that feature enabled.
And that's probably because of the work that it takes to do it is probably.
Yeah. Another thing is in between language. If I watch the same game in French or in English, they will switch ads because the market are a little bit different. They use that technology to, and as you say, the ad partner of the local rink. I don't know if they react. I don't know if they changed their contract or they got some money back. But obviously, the ad does not have the same importance since now it's being replaced.
Yeah, I mean, the argument is it's still important to the people that are in the, at the arena, but definitely a fraction of what it was before. And so there was definitely, when it first rolled out, there was a lot of upset. So anyway, next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York asked, I'm looking for a heavy-duty C-stand with wheels for lighting. Which makes and models do you all suggest? Preferably a buy once, cry once deal, but mid-tier options appreciated as well. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I like the Matthews, and what's cool about the Matthews is you can build on to what you already have. For example, I have one right behind me. I believe you can buy wheels that can be attached to it later. So.
Yeah, I don't. Matthews, I have a lot of Matthews equipment. It's not one of the things I do. And I just happened to look up on the B&H site, roller stands, which is technically what you're looking for if you want wheels on a fixed stand. These impact ones are pretty inexpensive. I've always gone with the Avengers. The 34 is a little too big for me. I think this one, the Avenger Roller Stand 17, I have like 3 of these. They work really well. And the thing that I particularly like about them is that the whole wheel assemblies is spring-loaded. You can clip it up to the top. I am a little careful. Now, a C-stand is a different thing. And actually, we have another question coming up where we'll talk about a C-stand and the leg arrangements and the springs, which can be a big deal. So if you're looking for a roller stand, search on roller stand. You'll find them. As you spend more money, you do get more stability and less pinchability and with the folding legs and things like that.
Good, Courtney.
As a rule, C-stands do not have wheels on them because they're used for precisely setting a flag or something, and anybody who kicks it or bumps into it's going to move it if it has wheels on it. So you're probably not going to find many C-stands, but you can do as Bill was saying, get a roller stand which has a 5/8" spud on the top of it and put a C-stand arm on top of it if you really need wheels. But most Century stands don't have wheels.
Yeah, I think that typically roller or junior stands are what you're kind of looking for in that range. You do not want to put wheels on C-stands, and it's just not what they're built for. The entire assembly is not built for that. It wouldn't be safe. So I wouldn't recommend that. Avenger and Matthews are the two. If you're talking about buy one, cry once to make those work, you'll find that those last the longest. I have a wide variety of C-stands, and not all of them are Matthews or Avengers because they were inexpensive because I knew I wouldn't use them very much. So I have some newer ones that I use for the corners of this little fort that I've built in my room. But I knew that if I was going to use them every day, or if I was going to use them for client work, I almost always have a Matthews or Avenger stands. Go ahead, Courtney.
I use American Grip stands.
Yeah.
They're good. My wheeled stands, and they're nice because they will actually make custom heights for you if you want to. They made mine cut down.
Are they out of LA?
Yeah, they're out in the valley, out in Burbank somewhere.
That's great. Next question.
From Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany, has anyone seen the left-to-right mode for H2R gear?
Javier?
The default mode for H2R is top to bottom. So you have the inputs on, you add a gear, you have the inputs on the top and the outputs on the bottom. They have this mode when you can switch it up and have the inputs on the right, on the left, and the outputs on the right. So your flow chart won't go like this, it will go like this. But that is a paid feature, so you can try it if you are using the free version. For me, it doesn't work that much. I prefer the top down, but some people prefer to have this left to right distribution.
I'm really interested in that, actually. One of the big problems I had with H2R was that every flow chart that I've seen in production goes left to right. And it was really, so if you haven't done a lot of gear wiring diagrams, the top to bottom made sense. I'm sure made more sense probably. But for all of us that have done them for the last decade, the top to bottom was like asking us to do something completely backwards from what we were used to. So I'm definitely going to check it out because that was a big, I would start working on stuff in H2R gear and then just go, oh, I can't I can't do this. Then I went back to OmniGraffle and went left to right. So I will definitely check that out. It's a really good suggestion. No, because that was probably the biggest reason I was having trouble using it was that it was going in a format that my brain couldn't manage after, just limited by 15 years or 10 or 15 years of building these. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida asked, Zoomtopia behind the scenes webinar today at 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. Thoughts? I hope this is being archived. I have a live show to switch.
I think it'll be really interesting. I think Sam is running those shows, and I think that it'll be a great overview of how they put that together. They did an incredible job of putting an enormous number of people into the system, and I think learning a little bit more about how they approached it will be really interesting. Next question.
Joshua Minden in Madison, Wisconsin asked, I'm setting up a siphon-based Zoom ISO workflow for a virtual event. What's the best production software for cutting the show on a Mac? Budget sub $400.
I still think that if you're going to go under $400 and you're looking for the best production software, I would still probably lean towards Mimo for that type of thing. There is, it's sub $400. Now it's not sub $400 forever. It's $70 a month or something like that. But you could, so or $50. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but it is. So there is a cost to it per month. So it may add up to more than that over the year. But it is on the Mac. I haven't found. I mean, it takes a little bit. So the thing about Mimo, and it took poor Oliver, a decade to get me. It felt like a decade to get me to even open it up. I'd open it up and I go, the interface is so weird. I can't do this. And same thing we were talking when they do our graphics. I was like, this doesn't work at all. But as I've gotten used to it, it's actually a pretty effective interface for running these kinds of shows. For simple shows that I need to cut through, and even relatively complex ones, you can put together things. And so I use Mimo when we're doing a really small show that I don't need all the other hardware and everything else that I'm doing typically. It's great because it's kind of a single, like when you see the Michael Krasny show that I do on Fridays, I'm using that and I'm just kind of noodling with putting things together inside of that system. And so I think that Mimo is probably the one that is probably the best on the Mac. I mean, obviously if you go to PC, you're going to probably, vMix would probably be the solution for that. Next question.
And I have a question. I need to run a 200-foot Ethernet cable and would like to know which cable and source and whether I need a repeater amplifier to do this.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm tapping into the condo's main source. They've got an excellent connection to the internet, and I'm about 200 feet away. So I was just wondering, do I need a specific kind of Ethernet cable? And if so, do I need a repeater or a amplifier?
Yeah, go ahead, Serge.
At 200 feet, you should not need any amplifier or repeater. By the way, it's not an amplifier. It's a switch or a hub that acts as a repeater. The thing, though, is I will recommend to have a Cat6 cable. That way you will be sure to get your gigabit internet without problem. And if you pass through electric interference, be sure to have a shielded cable. That way you will not have problem.
Yeah, and we haven't had any trouble with anything under about 400 feet, when it comes to Ethernet. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was just going to say, anybody have any suggestions on sources for them?
Monoprice. Like that's one, it's funny. I will not buy Monoprice HDMI cables anymore because I've had so many issues with them. But most of my Ethernet cables at this point are all from Monoprice, especially the longer ones. The other option is just to the other option is to buy a roll of Ethernet. You buy a 1,000-foot roll of Ethernet and you get connectors and then you just make them exactly the length you need them rather than a 200-foot or 250 or 150. I will admit that I get Monoprice most of the time for just 25, 50-foot. If we do need to do something that's going to be there forever, then I'd probably get a roll and ends and I would deal with it. I do not like making Ethernet cables. I've said that before. Like I hate it. It's just there's something about it that's tiddly and I just don't. I don't like it. So it feels very imprecise, I think, is the problem for me. And so my brain just doesn't like it. But if I'm going to build something that has to be a certain length, I would absolutely, or a couple runs that were going to be exactly a certain length, I'm going to be stuck with it for the next, 10 years or whatever, I'd probably build a custom one or have somebody do it for me. Go ahead, Serge.
I tend to go the other way around. If I know exactly the length I need, I will buy the cable that already have the connector in it. The reason is the connector will be melt and it's more reliable for a few years than having something crimp that will dry out and might disconnect in the long run.
It's good. It's a good point. The one thing that you can do is definitely like Clark Cables and other folks will actually, you can just order a cable to length, and you might even be able to do it with monoprice. Might be a little bit more money, but monoprice is so inexpensive. But I think you get, you figure out exactly what the length is. My recommendation is not to measure it, but to run, get some. Get some couplers and actually run Ethernet. Don't even run string, but run Ethernet to that, even with couplers, to the place that you're trying to go, and make sure that it's just the length you want. If you're going to ask for it, and then ask for it be 5 feet longer than that, and then you're usually pretty good. Next question.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota asked, yesterday, I noticed the Teams appeared to have camera controls. Is this a new feature or something unique to Windows? Has anyone used this feature?
I have not seen that feature, but I don't use a webcam inside of Teams. So when on a Teams call, of course, I have a 6K and switcher and stuff like that. So I haven't actually had the opportunity to see that, but we'll keep our eye out for it. I don't know if it's new or not. Next question.
Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York asked, morning, guys. Our Impact C-stand holding a light has a leg that is leaned forward over time, and we tried tightening it, but it's still somewhat out of alignment. Any suggestions to fix it?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, replace it with a Matthews with an adjustable leg on it. That would be the best solution. The problem is, I think I'm not sure if this particular C-stand, they have the folding legs that fold down, and they usually have little cam-oriented cut tops so that when they're aligned correctly, they slot together and line up, and the spring holds them in their detent position. It could be that spring has lost its springiness, so you may have to be able to disassemble it and stretch that spring back out again. It may return it to its tightness to keep it from wobbling. But putting a light on a C-stand is usually a bad idea because it's probably too much weight for it, unless it's a LED light.
You good, Bill?
So it depends on the kind of C-stand and the kind of leg arrangements. One of the things that C-stands are known for is what is called a lazy leg or some adjustable leg. When you said tighten it, that's the first thing I thought of, that maybe that's the lazy leg part of your C-stand, and for some reason it's gotten loosened up over time. Typically, C-stands are adjustable through a big hex nut. You can actually take all the legs off if it's a normal C-stand from a reliable manufacturer. It takes a big hex wrench, and then you take the top 2 fixtures off, and you can literally pop those legs off. Then you can put it in a vise, get yourself a small sledgehammer, tamp down the collet, and make sure that it's protected so you're not squishing it too much, and then just bang it back into gear. These are grip devices. They are not that delicate if they're well made. So you can be a little aggressive with them, and if it's bent, unbend it.
Yeah, it sounds like it is a loose issue, maybe not a bent issue. So I think that you either have, I think you have 3 options. You can go buy another Impact. You can go what Courtney said is buy a Matthews, that it's going to be a little bit more rugged. Or you can do a Google search on gas metal arc welding, otherwise known as MIG. So you're not going to open it and shut it again, but it won't lean anymore after you weld it open. So anyway, but a MIG welder will fix that right up for you. Next question.
Next question from Art Aldrich in New York. I've embedded audio in NDI that I need to mix. What's the workflow and software on Mac to do this?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'll try to answer the first part of the question. I would go with a Bird Dog Play. It's like $190. It's pretty darn cheap, and you could demux the audio that way and just take the audio output and run it into your Mac.
And the Bird Dog will take as many NDIs as you want and undo it?
I don't know that.
Yeah, so I'd be interested to see. It depends on how many cameras that you're trying to get into a mix. Again, I bet you that Ecamm would do it as far as seeing NDI and then being able to send out. David Paskin would know better than I do, but I think it would work, and Mimo Live would probably work as well. So you could probably use those as a way to output those out. I don't know if they do more than 2 channels though, so that'd be one thing for us to take a look at. It's an interesting problem. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael here. As I've been working through my Blender training, I've been using the primitive objects built into the program. What techniques are used to go beyond the primitives and model realistic objects like vehicles or buildings?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm admittedly not a great model maker, but I do go to Turbo Squid quite a bit.
That's one way to model stuff is to buy them. So that's another way. But if you're learning how to model, there's a couple key skills that you need to understand. The nomenclature, I don't know the Blender nomenclature, so I don't know exactly how it's going to call these things. But there are key things. The most basic one being a Boolean operation. So you're building some primitives, but you have to cut one primitive out of another, or cut one object out of another. And so you'll do a series of those Boolean operations. The real challenge with Boolean operations is managing the edges, because if you want to build kind of almost everything just about everything in the world actually isn't a perfect edge. And so you don't want the two polygons that are orthogonal to each other to come together perfectly, because then there's no highlight along that edge. And so a lot of times you're going to want to bevel that edge, or you're going to want to round that edge just a little bit, just to catch glints going down the side of it. And so the problem with Boolean is it creates a complex object that is difficult to find those edges and then to round them. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge. Another thing that you want to look at are using control splines. Back in my day, we called them C-meshes inside of Form Z, but basically these control splines or splines. You set a series of cross sections, and then you pull them together. So you say, I'm going to take these 10 cross sections. Those might change a little bit, and it's really how we used to build ships. And you build these ribs, and then you say, I'm going to attach these ribs in order, and it will simply build a model between those ribs, and you can build some pretty complex objects with that. And then the final one that is probably the most popular modeling technique at the moment is subdivision surface modeling. So basically it turns the primitive that you have into a cage. And so then if you think about a spline, it just builds splines that are being driven by that cage. And so then as you start to pull polygons out of that cage, you're able to build a softer thing, and you can add more geometry to that cage, and it will keep on tightening the solution. So many things that you see many things that are done for entertainment use are done that way. It's not precise enough typically to be used in like automotive, which is much more of a spline-based system, and at least in my experience, using things like Alias Studio and so on and so forth. And so that's a different process. But subdivision surface modeling is a pretty popular one. It's probably the first one that you should learn. And I'm sure that if you do subdivision surface modeling for Blender, you'll find like 3,000 tutorials on how to do that on YouTube.
And now you know why I go to Turbo Squid.
It's fun though. It's fun. You get some music going, you start building models. It's good. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Alex covered most of it extensively. One thing he didn't mention is extrusion, which is the next step after adding doing Booleans and primitives. You can just draw a freehand 2D shape and then extrude it along the z-axis to make a 3D object out of it. And that comes in pretty handy for generating fairly complex X and Y curved surfaces, but then and extruding them out in a single direction in the z-axis.
Yeah, and those tools have gotten a lot better, because when you do the extrusion, you can also typically round the caps. So you can put little rounds around the front cap and the back cap, and oftentimes it will derive extra controls over the edge of that cap, as well as the core of the body of the cap, as well as the sides, so that if you want to add different colors, it's really popular for logos, and extruding type is a really popular thing to do in that area. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty, from Central Florida asks, can you explain the flow of an HLS live stream?
Well, we did a second hour on that, so I will try to give you the most abbreviated version I can think of. Essentially what happens is the flow is basically, the first thing that happens is that you have raw video coming in, and that video is then compressed. Now it's compressed into basically, the first thing that's done is it's done with temporal compression. So we try to find similarities between the frames, and then we have spatial compression that finishes that off by finding similarities within the actual pixels of each frame. That temporal compression is usually it's usually grouped into what we call a group of pictures, or GOP. So that's a group of pictures. I always wish it should be GOF, but it's a group of frames. But anyway, group of pictures. Those group of pictures are typically then evenly divided into what were called segments. So you might have, for instance, a group of pictures that is a 2-second GOP that's put into a segment that's a 6-second segment. So it has 3 GOPs that sit inside of each one of them. Those segments are part of what we use for adaptive bit rate. So basically what happens is that we make a whole bunch of versions of this. So we say we've got a 240, 360, 480, 540, 720, 1080p, 2160. Like there's and there might be multiple resolutions of all of those. So your ladder might be anywhere from 6 to 12 to many other ones, because you also may decide, oh, I want to do HDR and SDR. So then I have another part of that ladder, which is managing all of those. So now you have all of these streams going, or all these files. They're not streams. They're lots of these little segments. And the segments are going to be distributed to, all those segments are made available. Basically, you stream into usually some kind of, you stream to an ingest point. That ingest point will send it to an origin. The origin is what kind of it has all the files that are there. That origin distributes those out to the edge. So the edge is in a CDN. It makes them available. And oftentimes they're only available for a couple seconds. Like they're there. If anybody else needs them, it's going to give them to them. But otherwise they're gone, because otherwise they'd fill up. So basically these edge servers make those available to folks that are there. Now, how do you pick which one you need? Well, that happens in the player and the manifest. The manifest is basically it's literally a text document that says, this is what I have available to you. This is all the streams that are available here, and you just have to ask for which one you want. The player looks at the performance of the internet for the user, and the player basically says, it looks at how fast those bits are coming down and says, oh, I think I can handle a 1080p, or I can handle a 720p, or whatever. And but the player is making that decision based on the manifest that tells it what streams are available, and it can change at any segment. So a lot of times what you'll see when you start is you'll see your video generally be low resolution right at the very beginning. So it's a quick start, and it knows that almost everybody can see that. As soon as it sees how fast those are going through, the player will make a decision to change to whatever resolution it thinks it can handle at that point. If it struggles at that point for any reason, it often will shift back down. And again, within every segment, it can make a choice to shift to a lower resolution or a higher resolution based on the performance of the network. So hopefully that's about it. That's about as fast as I can describe HLS. Anyway, it's how you get almost all the video that you get when you go to YouTube or Facebook or whatever. HLS is a pretty popular piece, and that's a very simplistic version of how it actually works. Next question.
It was also an awesome suggestion. Here we go. Next question, Douglas Carmichael. If you had to create filler 3D content for an event like the famous Seattle Mariners hydro races and didn't have an experienced modeler on staff, where would you find quality models quickly? Could you use a service like TurboSquid?
Go ahead, Jesse.
When I'm doing this, I like to go to CG Trader, where you have your simple searches and you've got your price range, as well as licenses to check out.
And banana for scale. There we go. Yeah. Well done. So the CG Trader is great. TurboSquid is also very good. I think it's going to be a really interesting time as we go forward. I don't know when. If the Apple products, Keynote and Pages and Numbers start supporting USDZ, the demand for these products is going to go through the roof. What's going to be interesting is because the market's so much larger, the demand of these products is going to go through the roof, but the price per product is going to go through the floor. And so, if I would not want to be holding stock for, you'd think that you'd want to hold stock for TurboSquid, but that could be really complicated because the price, you're not going to be able to get $150 a model. You're going to get $15 for 10. It's going to be clip art, and so it's going to be a really interesting change in the business model as we go forward, because 3D is about to become a big deal. Next question.
Todd Rains in Allen, Texas asks, StreamYard just added StreamYard On Air webinar to their product. It uses the same studio interface, but allows registration, embedding, etc. Any thoughts?
I don't have enough experience with it to know I think that StreamYard has produced a lot of folks that are able to do some very basic things. I think the real challenge with StreamYard is it does a lot of things really quickly out of the gate that are really good. It's just that you're now in a box. And so if you get used to doing that, it's just hard to grow to something bigger. That's what I normally see. When I see StreamYard, I feel like I usually know that they're using StreamYard, and I know they can't do much more than what they're doing. And so you don't have any open space. That is great for a lot of folks, especially doing corporate, doing something simple. This isn't your business. So I think StreamYard definitely provides a great service in that area, but you just have to know you're kind of going into it that you're going to be limited to some degree on what you can and can't do. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asked, StreamYard had a bunch of announcements yesterday, including client-side recording and webinars. Thoughts about what they've introduced, and how about a second hour?
Yeah, I think I gave my thoughts on what they I didn't see the announcement, so I haven't seen anything new. I would love to have them on. So if we have somebody out there that's there, I'd love to bring them on. Love to talk to them about it. Learn more about what they do. So absolutely, if you know somebody there, we're happy to have them on. Next question.
Hershey Trevedi in Daytona Beach, Florida, and here in our panel. Mitchell, thanks for the question about the Ethernet cables. I've been doing some reading on them and wanted to know what the panel thought about Cat 8 and the others like 6E and such. Here is a supported link, and he provides one right there.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I've found that, and here's the one thing I've learned, is that if I have any kind of connection to make, I don't think it really cares if it's 3 feet long, whether it's a 6 or an 8 or anything in between. It just becomes an issue over longer cables. So that's one of the things I've learned. But it's the wrap and the type of twist that's in there that really makes the big difference.
Go ahead, Jason.
So Cat 8 differs more than Cat 7. In fact, it's just probably what you want to think of if you're not thinking of Cat 6. Here's a quick graphic to compare them and how they differ. Suffice it to say, there's a 40x difference between Cat 6 and Cat 8, meaning up to 40 gigabits per second. That's insanely different. And understand that the real limitation here is if you're ever going to put them in a patch panel, they are nearly impossible to terminate. So, just be really, really careful.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And you might look at getting shielded Cat 6E or Cat 8 because if you're going to be running any signals through an RF hostile area near any transmitters or near any power equipment, which is emanating a magnetic field, you probably want to get shielded Cat 5 or Cat 6.
Next question.
From Paul Terry Wallace in Austin, Texas, how would you live stream a softball game with 3 iPhones to all the Restream IO channels and end up with an insanely great final version for rewatching?
How would you live stream a softball game with 3 iPhones to all the Restream IO channels? Yeah. Number one is I wouldn't do that because you'd end up with one viewer on everything that's there, or you're massively subdividing your that's the big issue is you're massively subdividing your audience. Again, we're going to do it because we're testing all the different platforms. And so as we finish 2.5, we're going to start expanding how many things we're streaming out to. And that's going to be a test for us so we can compare quality and compare other things. So I want to say that we are going to do this, but I never recommend it to clients. Basically subdividing your audience with live streaming really makes the interactivity much more complicated, and interactivity is why you live stream. In my opinion. So the 3 phones, I think that the main thing you have to figure out is how those phones you can connect them to Ethernet. So you can do lightning to. Basically, it's a lightning, and then it has another lightning and a USB, and then that USB get connected to an Ethernet cable, and so then now you can run them back onto a network, and then you could use NDI, on them, so you could literally run Ethernet cable out to them, put them on the network, and have them using NDI to get back to where they need to go, and that might be the easiest way. You could, of course, use HDMI. Same thing. You can convert it to HDMI and then to SDI, and then run it back to a switcher. So those are all things that are possible. I wouldn't try to do it wirelessly on an iPhone at a baseball stadium, a baseball field. That would probably be pretty rough. But the big problem you're going to have is really that wide shots on live streams are not very compelling. That's the real issue. Is they just the dwell time will be very, very low. Well, people will come and they'll watch it for a little while and they'll be bored because they're really far away, or they'll feel really far away. And even if you zoom in 3x, from where you can be, if you can find places that you can get right behind, one of the places that you can do it is usually the backstop has all that fencing. You can put your phone right into that, just behind the fencing, and you won't see the fencing, but you will see the player. So figuring out a couple cool places to put it there where you're behind the fencing, so you don't get hit by a a ball, you can get some relatively good shots. So you want one there, then you'll want one wide of the field, and then you'll probably want one wide looking out to the field and one wide looking in. But the problem you're going to end up with is that you're not going to get a lot of close-ups. And the issue with that really is that you're not going to get a lot of close-ups, and we are so used to watching baseball, like on with really, really good lenses and cameras and things. And so people will very quickly go, this isn't what I'm used to. And again, I would be surprised if you get an average view time over 2 minutes. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asked, tripod, desks, gimmick, or great idea? There's a couple out there for Cyber Week, but 300 seems high for essentially a worktop to put on a heavy tripod.
Go, Jesse.
I have a hard time even calling this a gimmick. There's a reason that your desks have 4 legs at the far corners of the desk. It's for balance. I would not put anything on a tripod desk ever.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's interesting because I spent a lot of time researching a good tripod to put on my desk, which is a very solid surface. I ended up with a slick Creator Pod. But the idea of a tripod desk is intriguing, but like Jesse just said, I'm not sure if it'd be as solid.
Go ahead, Bill.
For a few years, I actually carried one of these in my briefcase because I was doing a lot of traveling, and I was also on deadline every month for articles. And I found that it was really easy for me to put a set of headphones on and write in airports. So I had a small folding stand. And the things that I learned, number one, most tripods do not get terribly low. If you're going to use it for something like typing, make sure that the base of your laptop comes down so you're not typing up with your arms arched. And the more portable it is, in my case, for that use, the more I used it. I love that thing. I still have it in there. And the next time I have to travel a lot, if I have to write when I travel, I will take it with me.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and Mitch, I think he's not talking about tripods you put on your desk, but a desk you put on your tripod. Looks something like this. And I see these used by script supervisors all the time on movie sets because they have to carry a laptop around these days, and they have to move from setup to setup, so they're constantly moving their desk and has to be able to set up over the top of cables. They can't roll stuff anywhere. So it becomes handy for that. It's adjustable in height. They can be sitting or standing. So it does have its application, but stability, like we said earlier, 3 legs is not great for stability, especially if you're going to put it up very high. And it's going to be top heavy if you put a laptop on it. Somebody can come up and bump that thing, and your laptop will then be in pieces on the floor.
Go ahead. Next question.
Next question from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. Alex, you said you throw all files which will be played out by a Stream Deck into some software to make sure they're all in the same format. What tool does that, and what are the other use cases?
I use Compressor. So I use Apple Compressor, mostly because I use Apple ProRes. And if you're using Compressor with Apple ProRes, it'll be 4 to 5 times faster than Media Encoder on the Mac. So, and that's because it's fully using the M1 or M2 chips along with the accelerator chips. And so it's just a lot faster than everything else on a Mac. So if you're going to be on a PC, Media Encoder would probably be what I would use to do the same thing. But Adobe's support of Apple ProRes has been spotty in my experience. And so I've it's been an on again, off again relationship. And so a lot of us just settled into Compressor. It's $50 without a subscription. Not that I'm bitter. And then you can compress all the things you want. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, and if you want it to take 4 or 5 minutes, the Media Encoder is a good suggestion. Maybe you need a cup of coffee, something like that.
Next question.
Next question. Paul Terry Wallace is back from Austin, Texas. Let's say you're going to make a documentary with 3 or 4 iPhones, okay? What's the best way to mount them handheld and tripod, monopod, or fixed and coordinate the cuts between them and manage sound? Ideas?
Go, Jesse.
One thing to consider if you are shooting on an iPhone is that the picture doesn't always keep a perfect frame rate. So if you're doing long interview takes, you'll definitely want to clap at the top and the bottom of the shot. And I would consider also figuring out a way to get clean video out from your iPhone, run it into an ATEM ISO or something similar so that you do have actual frame sync between the iPhones.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, everything Jesse said. The other thing for me is that you're going to probably be doing post-production on this. So that the key for me is to get used to a workflow that allows you to capture on the 3 phones or 4 phones and then bring it back into post. I've never been very successful with live switching, although there's some systems that do that. The specific thing, though, is that in the mounts for iPhones, usually there are 2 different groupings of them. There are plastic ones with springs that hold the phone, and there are milled aluminum ones that usually have a thumb screw. Those milled aluminums are far more stable. If you want to go to the high end of that, Small Rig makes iPhone cages that are much better. They provide quarter 20s for you. And if you want to do this over and over again, I would go in that direction or the aluminum. I'd stay away from the plastic holders with springs in them.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And for handheld, you can get the DJI gimbal, which works quite well. It's about $129, designed to hold a phone and give you, control over your horizon and nice smooth moves with that. And I think it can also be mounted on top of a tripod too, if you want to have that mount and use it on a stable base as well. So
yeah, this is the Small Rig, and this is what Bill was talking about, and it is the best rig that I've seen for being able to use it actually in production. Tons of quarter 20s. It protects the camera as well. You can actually, it's got mounts for the moment lenses. I don't think they say that, but it has mounts for moment lenses if you want to put them in there, so you can use them for with the different pieces there. So it's a really, really well-made piece, and I would highly recommend it. The thing about documentaries is that you're not really going to do a live cut typically. So if you're doing interview, it's usually a mixture of interviews, B-roll, and some coverage, but you're not really doing a multicam in the same way. You're going to have one shot that the person is looking relatively straight at the camera. They might be looking off camera to an interview, or you're going to put them behind a teleprompter and doing a Teratron. But you're going to basically have one camera that's straight on. You typically have another camera to the side, and that's basically so you can do cutaways. Usually when you see a side shot, it means that you're using that other shot to cut around things that they said. So when you see them cut. And then the third camera is typically a high and wide that shows the production, or it's the reverse of the interviewer. And usually a lot of it's like this. Sometimes they just shoot, and sometimes they just literally turn the camera around and just shoot the interviewer going like this, if they want to do it. That's more of the 60-minute style. But those are how you use, if you're going to have 3 cameras, that's kind of what you'd end up using. But you're not really trying to cut those cameras. You're just trying to make sure that they're just right. Oftentimes you want to see them while all in one place. So you have to think about how you're going to do a multi-split. I definitely agree that DJI, I find their the way that they run the app, the fact that the stabilizer won't work, the DJI won't work until you've registered in the app, which, for a stabilizer, I find repugnant. But at the same time, they still build the best one that's out there with the most number of features. And so they're winning so far. As soon as I find one with the same number of features, I probably use something else, because I just can't believe that I have to register on an app to be allowed to use something that doesn't need. I understand it with the drones, but this is like, especially a Chinese company, I'm like, so anyway, that doesn't land very well with me, but it is a really good one, and I've used it for many, many pickup shots, many, many places of coverage, and I haven't found one that I like better than that one. So I think that's, definitely having a stabilizer would make a difference. And then it's not an iPhone, or I wouldn't put my iPhone in it. But the other thing you may want for documentaries is a drone. And again, all roads lead to DJI. We may have issues with them, but they still rule the whole system pretty tightly, because no one else is caught up technologically. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, if you're putting Ethernet cables on the walls of a home, would it make sense to future-proof with Cat 7 or 8?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would say the way to future-proof is, first of all, check the price on the Cat 7 or 8. It might be very expensive to do it in a house, but the way to future-proof it is run a fiber cable at the same time.
Go, Jason.
All right. It's not about the cable. So if you're going to be the person using this instead of, doing it for the next person who's, going to be buying the house, then understand that the termination is the vast majority of the cost. Last time I did this for a client, I took Alex's suggestion and actually put TAC 12 everywhere, in addition to the Cat 7. And the Cat 7 was a massive pain. If you're going to do any of this, do Cat 8. It's much easier to terminate. It was never actually officially adopted in the U.S.
Go ahead, Bill.
The other thing is that when I did that once with building, I made a mistake and ran the cable serially. So from the hub to point A, then to point B, then to point C, all the way back. And at that point, if you're going to cut the cable at a place, you're going to need something that'll have in and outs on it in order to keep that network alive. I should have run individual runs out from the hub to everything. And then I would have had a much simpler way to deal with everything in post.
Yeah, and I would definitely go from a central hub, a central server room, or whatever you're going to use there, out to the edge. I would use or TAC12 to future-proof it. Like the hardest part is running it. So if you're going to run something, you can go ahead and run, Cat. I would still probably run Cat 6E, to be honest, just because I don't think I would need it for more than that. If I needed more than that, I would use the fiber. But you could go to a higher standard there. But running TAC12, the cost of the cable is not very high compared to the cost of the labor to get it there. And once you get it there, unless you cut it, most of us would not outstrip a TAC12 to every room in our lifetime. As far as what we can move from room to room. So some might, but most would not.
Well, and a quick note on that. It was $500 for a $2 million building. $500 for TAC12.
Exactly,
it costs
just
nothing.
I'm working on some stuff right now, and one of the things we're talking about is dropping, some basic connectivity, so Ethernet and potentially some BNC in there, just to make it really easy. Like, I just want to plug something in and get a signal on the other end. But then we're looking at basically having basically running the fiber, and then having that fiber terminate in something that we can just plug a box into. So essentially you have a box that you just plug that into, and it has breakouts of whatever you want. That's how you can utilize the TAC12 more effectively. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas asks, the Insta360 Link has a flaw or bug and can't show video on the app and in Zoom at the same time. The Mac doesn't have the same issue. It works great. Is there a way to fix this?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Not that I know of, but maybe they can fix it in software later. But I think it has to do, as we mentioned earlier, is that the control software over the gimbal is tied to that display in the app. So that if you want to use your mouse to control the movement of the gimbal, you can minimize that control, turn off the display, minimize it so it appears just as a little panel at the bottom of your screen. And you can still pop up controls so that you can control every aspect of the camera and the gimbal from that control without it displaying a picture. So you won't be able to display the picture, but if you have something else displaying the picture like Zoom or Teams, then you can use the little app minimized and then use the controls on the little app.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. YouTuber Jerry Barnaclesberg built an 8-CPU server in 2017 for rendering and encoding workloads. With the proliferation of cloud services, does it make sense to have such equipment as an individual?
Probably not. I think he did it because it was probably a good YouTube video. But I think that, you probably don't need those things. A lot of times as an individual, you have time on your side. And especially depending on what you're compressing to, there's a lot of acceleration that's available. So I think the problem with cloud services is they still cost money. Remember that, cloud service is just somebody else's hardware. So you're still paying rent on that. And so you're going to, that's the thing that starts to add up. So if you really need to do it all the time and you have a way for a revenue stream to support that, then cloud makes sense. If you're doing it on a day-to-day basis, it may not. Next question.
Next question from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. There are lots of bad boys out there. How do panelists protect their networks and workstations from viruses and other risks?
I Courtney will hate this one, but I buy Mac. So that's step one. Anyway, we'll have to go pretty quickly here. Javier.
My quickest tip would be common sense. Like the most time that I've got bitten by something is when you do something you're not supposed to do. So treat the internet like the regular street. Like you wouldn't open your door for anyone. Don't open emails you don't know. You're going to go to sites you don't know. So common sense.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Regardless of how tempting the email seems, like your invoice for $999 is processed through Amazon. Never click on anything in an email unless you specifically ask someone to send you something and it's from that person you asked them to send it to you. Otherwise, right in the garbage if it's got an attachment.
Yeah, go ahead. Jason.
Get and use a password manager. Do a clean load of whatever OS you have the minute you get the computer. And last but not least, once you have your clean load, especially with Windows, strip it to the bare metal. Uninstall absolutely everything.
Yeah, and you just want to, proper firewall management. You do want a router that's going to do that. You want to have control over the firewall. You want to have some visibility over that firewall. So those are other things that you want to, Mac or PC. I was a little flippant about that earlier. Macs just aren't big targets. So, and the way that the system works is not really built to be centrally managed. And so it tends to be a little bit more robust in that area, or we just don't see very much of it. But definitely with PCs, you have to have a really tight management of your firewall. And as everybody said, don't click on anything you don't know. Last question for the first hour.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany is here again. Fluid heads are made for specific weights. When it says it's usable up to 8 kilograms, what is the weight you put upon this head? 8 kilograms or less as a maximum?
You can usually safely put up to 8 kilograms on a head. When you start putting them over that, you're starting to put pressure on the fluid head. And what happens is you can get away with a little bit of that if you keep it perfectly balanced, because it's not putting a lot of pressure on it. But as you lean it forward or lean it back, you're putting pressure on that fluid head. And over time, that fluid head will cease to work well, and then it'll start to bleed. It'll literally bleed the fluid. Not that I've ever done this, but it'll literally bleed the fluid out of the head. So I wouldn't recommend over weighting your head. Definitely pay close attention to not going over that. You can go to the max safely, but I wouldn't go over it. All right. We're so excited. So excited for the second hour. We have Paul Isaacs. Paul Isaacs is the Director of Product Management and Design at Sound Devices. And we also have Gary Trenda, who is the RF Applications Engineer. And I assume that what we're talking about is probably Gary's baby or both of theirs as far as, and this is the new wireless receiver that Sound Devices has released. And I'm going to let Paul kick it off and describe a little bit about how this receiver works. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks for having us, Alex. It's always great to be here. And hello to everybody this morning. Good to see you all. Yeah, where do I start? I'm not going to give you any preamble. Let's just get straight into the...
a little preamble's fine. We can do a little preamble. I'm excited about it. How did you guys come up? So this all comes from the purchase of Audio Limited, right?
Well, that's where it all started. Yeah, about 5-6 years ago now. You'll know that we bought Audio Limited, a really renowned wireless company, an English company. And, it was really a match made in heaven. The engineering team there and the people involved there, we really got on with well. And it just seemed like the perfect collaboration. So after many talks, we decided to buy Audio Limited. And the first product that we brought out was the A10 transmitter and the A10 dual super slot receiver, which proved to be a really good start for us in the wireless business, digital modulation. But we always knew that was a first step. And we knew also that we were quite a long way behind the competition. So really over the last 5 years, now that really everything's now been consolidated under the Sound Devices brand, the engineering, everything's within the design and the engineering, the programming, the hardware, everything is now under the Sound Devices umbrella. And we started to make progress. We had a long-term plan, and that long-term plan was what we call the A20 platform. Actually, it's got a much more fancy name now. You may have seen the word Astral banded around. So this is like the new name for our A20 platform, which is really the name of a wireless ecosystem. So you're going to see the first products in that Astral range are the A20 mini transmitter, this A20 Nexus multi-channel receiver, the A20 RX dual receiver, which we released about 6 months ago. These are the start of that platform and all part of the Astral platform. You're going to be seeing a lot more product come under this banner. So, we had this long-term vision that, we knew that we needed to really sort of jump our game in terms of what we're technically capable of. And we wanted to not just be another IAM wireless manufacturer. We looked at all the issues in the industry and thought, well, where do we want to be? What would we like to achieve ideally? And part of that was SpectraBand, which I believe you may all be familiar with. We sort of released the SpectraBand technology with the A20 RX dual receiver about 6 months ago. And what that really means is a very wide tuning range. So we have a 470 megahertz to 1525 megahertz tuning range, which is the widest in the industry. So that is something that we wanted.
And for our listeners, why does the wide tuning range make such a big difference?
Well, what it means is, the bottom line is, you're always going to be able to find a frequency no matter where you are in the world. It also means that you don't need multiple SKUs of receiver and transmitter, because the one model of transmitter, in this case the A20 mini transmitter and the A20 RX and now the A20 Nexus, can operate over the entire band. If you
and does that in some way future-proof you also from any changes in the FCC or other things? Like, there's a lot of us end up and have a lot of receivers, and we have a lot of transmitters and receivers we can't use.
Yeah, I mean, Gary can go more into that aspect of, he loves anything to do with the FCC. So, comment, Gary.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah. Well,
not that I'm bitter.
No, I love regulatory talks. Yeah. Because we're able to do 470 to 1525, as Paul said, we're able to have settings for any country that you're in. And if the regulatory environment changes, we can, with a firmware update, change the tuning range of the receiver or the transmitter. And so, as we've had DTV repack in the United States, rather than asking someone to buy a new wireless transmitter receiver set, we could just make a software change and allow you to tune to those different frequency bands.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So moving on, so SpectraBand is one part of it. Another part of the technology that we wanted to achieve was something called GainForward, which has now been out for over a year. And what that means is that essentially there's no more need to control the gain on the transmitter.
Right.
We've designed an audio front end on the transmitter that can essentially far exceed the dynamic range of what a lav mic can offer, the best lav mic can offer. So we essentially just transmit the entire dynamic range from the transmitter to the receiver and then straight into the recorder. And that really negates the need now to have to worry about transmitter gain, which is always a stress on set when you're having to be concerned about whether talent is going to shout or whisper. You don't have to worry about it. You can just adjust the trim on your mixer now, just like you would a hardwired mic. So that was another important part of that.
And that way you're really, and you're able to now control whatever's being sent or whatever's being used. You're able to control that from the receiver. So you're not even controlling it. It's just sending all of that data to the receiver. Is that and the receiver is just
that's correct,
picking out what it wants to hand to what it wants to output.
Right. So and you can connect your receiver outputs digitally to whatever mixer you happen to be using, whether it's via Dante, AES, or what have you, and then just use the trim control there. By virtue of the fact that the preamps on the transmitter are so low noise and have such a high amount of headroom, it's impossible to clip the transmitter itself or under. So
you would clip if you clip something, you would clip the lav itself.
The lav, exactly.
Right, which would be difficult. Like what's the typical dynamic range of the lav?
About 115 max, 110, 115 dB of range on a lav, and the dynamic range of the transmitter is over 130 dB.
Right, that makes sense. So you're not worried about that anymore. You're able to now have a wide spectrum. So how's the new device work? How does it talk to the?
Right. So let's get to the A20 Nexus now, and I'm going to try and sum it up in one sentence, but. Can you imagine a whole rack's worth of wireless, 16 channels of wireless with full 16-channel support, true diversity, with Dante I/O, full backlink control from the receiver to all your transmitters, in a half rack 1U.
I just did a show
device
that had only 8, and it was, the rack was just the audio, processing was probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 U of all the things that we had connected to that. So it was, and that was relatively compact, for what we were doing, and that was an Axient system.
Right. So this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to see how far we could push the envelope, and 16 channels in a half rack, 1U box. It's actually, the base unit is 8 channels, but it can be upgraded to 16 channels. We have a +4 plugin, so you can upgrade from 8 to 12 and then to 16. We have a 2.4 gigahertz proprietary backlink control, which we call NexLink, which the main design premise there was that the range of that backlink needed to be at least twice as good as the forward link, and should be able to operate in.
And when you say backlink and forward link, what you're talking about is that be able to send the controls and information out has to be twice as far as being able to actually send audio.
Exactly. So your wireless audio transmission is going to drop out long before the control of the transmitter will drop out. So if you're finding, for instance, one example is you're starting to get dropouts on the audio, you can then go, okay, well, let's crank up the RF power a little bit, and you can do it all remotely and then hopefully remedy that situation. That's just one example of 1,000 different things you can do. So we can control every element of the transmitter via this 2.4 gigahertz backlink control. But the other, apart from range, it was very important that range you could still get that range in a very congested 2.4 gigahertz environment. And we all know that every production environment is just full of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and notorious for causing problems. So we've developed our own protocol, which is extremely resilient to that congestion. And the main physics behind that, because it almost sounds like magic, is, well, it's a number of things, but primarily there's a law of physics with RF that if you have a much lower data rate, it's like inversely proportional to range. You get more range.
Right.
So the lower data rate, the more range. And because we're only doing control and we don't need super low latency control, we can have, on and off commands, mute commands, frequency change commands. They can all happen at very low data rate, which enables us to get this phenomenal range. Gary, last week you went and did some tests with that whole NexLink in the local baseball stadium. Tell them about that.
Sure. Oh, we just took it to a sports arena here and tested it out to where we were set up on an upper level it's a typical like basketball arena, and we could walk around the concourses on the lower levels and still have control throughout the entire facility with this 2.4 gig data link for exactly the reason you said.
Through the concrete and through the rebar.
Yeah, through the concrete and rebar. And long after we had lost audio, and it is because the data rate is lower. We've got our proprietary frequency hopping scheme, so we're reducing collisions. And we're also able to resend the commands and get acknowledgments back. And so if you've got a few seconds for a power command, that allows you a tremendous number of retries of data either direction. And so we've got that good bidirectional data link that's been very robust for us in all of our testing. And as we're saying, it exceeds the forward link by at least 2x.
The other thing to note there is actually the backlink, the NexLink, is actually true diversity as well. It's not just the wireless audio forward link, which is true diversity across.
And can you explain, when you say true diversity, for our listeners, can you explain what true diversity means?
Go on, Gary.
Sure. So what we mean is that we've got 2 radios that are receiving the signal. So in the case of the audio link coming from the body pack transmitter back to your receiver, you're coming in with your antenna, and you've got an A and a B antenna input. That's going through some filtering, some amplification, and ultimately that digital data stream is getting decoded. And so we're decoding that digital data stream 2 different times, once on the A and once on the B antenna. And we're actually looking at the audio and making a comparison with the audio and deciding at that point which antenna we like better for audio, and we can do that on a almost like a bit by bit level because we're decoding both.
And one of the, the real magic behind this Nexus system is that all 16 channels benefit from this true diversity. Now, if you were to do this with the traditional design with any other system that's currently on the market, you would essentially need 32 paths, because you're talking about 2 independent receiver channels per channel, essentially. And we do the magic inside an FPGA, and where it basically looks at this whole slab of RF, is able to decode, demodulate all 16 channels, benefiting from that true diversity. So that's where the magic comes from.
I know a little bit of backstory here is that when the announcement went out, I really pressured Paul and Gary to come on today.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Not a great.
Yeah, it was like, can you come on tomorrow? So do you are you able? I don't know how set up you are. Are you able to show us the little box?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We can show lots of things in real time here. We could either do it from Gary's setup, which is probably preferable, but
there we go.
We'll go in and out here. So why don't we talk our way through the back panel first, right? Because that gives an idea of what, the capability that beyond what we've spoken about already. I just want to, before we start going into that, is there were 3 applications we were really looking at. We wanted to make this a very diverse product that can handle many applications, not just production sound, but broadcast, live events, all sorts of things. So we've designed it because it's small enough that it can go in a bag. If you're a production sound mixer, you can mount it on top of your mixer in a bag. Obviously, that's our primary industry with sound devices up till now. Mm-hmm. So we actually do have an accessory as well, that if you are an 8 series mixer recorder user, we have a quick dock accessory that allows you to mount the A20 Nexus directly on top of the 8 series, and it connects via the expansion port on the top. So all 16 channels of audio pass from the Nexus down to the 8 series. The power to the Nexus is all provided by the 8 series itself. Timecode is also passed back to the Nexus, and we'll talk more about timecode later, because you might think, why do I need timecode on a receiver? But there's some reasons for that. So it makes it a really neat cableless solution for 16 channels audio in the back. So that was one application. The other application is, yes, it can quite happily sit on a cart as well. And you can, by virtue of the fact that it's got Dante I/O, you can very easily rig it up on a cart, 16 channels. But the other key thing that we wanted to achieve was the ability to operate the Nexus remotely from a long distance. So there is Ethernet here. We have power over Ethernet. We have Dante audio over IP, and also the ability to control over IP.
And that control is through a web page?
I think that was Siri cutting in. Sorry. I'll get rid of that. Can you hear me, by the way?
We can hear you just fine.
Okay. So,
and what does the control look like as far as that goes?
I can actually quickly, I can quickly share my screen actually here and show you what that. There's a built-in web app, web server built into Nexus. So I can let's see, just move this out of the way. Go to the main screen.
So this is a web page. This is not some standalone. It can run on an iPad. Browser. It can run on a It's in any browser. You're going to be able to open it. So you have and you pretty much have full control over the receiver at this point. And is there anything that you have to go to the receiver for?
So no, you don't have to touch the front panel of the Nexus at all. And that, as I said, could be run remotely, and you can sort of you can get an overview here of all your channels, and go into any channel you want and see the RF history, the Q data, the battery remaining. You can change frequency, all of this sort of stuff from here. And you've even got your real-time spectrum analyzer here as well. So you can see exactly the lay of the land in terms of the RF environment.
Right.
And you can even from that spectrum analyzer, you can export CSV files and PNG files. So if you want to record the characteristics of the location, you can, and that future reference.
Right, and that's not just looking at the mics; it's looking at all the entire spectrum to show you what else might be floating around there. So those spikes are the mics that you have there. And how do you work around those spectral issues?
Well, if you did spot interference, you can actually move your cursor here. I'm getting into the weeds here, but you can move around here and go, okay, there's noise around here. Let's find a cleaner frequency. Let's maybe do that and assign that to a different channel. So then you move channel, you move your channels around that way. And I don't know if I'm actually on here, but so I can assign that to channel 1, and I don't know if I'm actually hooked up here. And move things around, but the idea. I mean, Gary can show you that because I think his unit's more set up for the real time show of this. But the point I wanted to make is that that's the third application, to be able to run the Nexus remotely, and you do have power over Ethernet. You have the Dante audio and the control. So and
what's amazing is, just even the simple things. You're seeing the quality of the connection. You're seeing the signal. You're seeing the battery life of all the things that are there. And that can be anybody. Again, it's not something that we have to, anybody can log in and see it. And theoretically over a VPN, I could have that control be coming from anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And obviously with the RTSA, you can switch it from tuning band to tuning band. So this, and we'll have Gary talk more about this, but this wide tuning range of 1 gigahertz, we essentially divvy up into what we call tuning bands, of which the typical width is 24 megahertz. And each of these tuning bands is filtered very, very tightly. We've almost got like brick wall filters at either side of that tuning band. So it makes it extremely immune. Each band is extremely immune to out-of-band interference. Gary, do you want to talk a bit more about that? If he's around.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to unmute. That's exactly right. And I can throw a little slide up here that shows you an example. So we talk a lot about SAW filters. And so what we're using is these SAW filters. It's a surface acoustic wave filter. And so the first filter that you'll see right after the antenna input is a SAW filter. And those are between 24 and 36 meg for A20 Nexus. And then we have an additional 24 meg SAW filter once we've decided on the tuning band. And so that's what I like to think about that is like, that's the RF that you're capturing. And so that's what Paul was showing you with that real-time spectrum analyzer view. And when Paul says that there's a steep roll-off, this is a quick graph that I did of a SAW filter. The yellow trace is the SAW filters that we're using. The green and the blue traces are more traditional RF filters made out of inductors and capacitors. And so they're both good filters, but there's just a difference in rejection when you get out of band. And so we're, in fact, this green one is set up to the exact same tuning band as the yellow. So the yellow is a SAW filter of a 24 meg wide, and the green is a traditional filter that's 24 meg wide. And so you just see the difference in out of band rejection. And so you'll hear us talking about that in relation to IFBs, camera hops, two-way radios, digital television stations, any of this unwanted interference. We're helping to filter this out. And so that's why we feel like the tuning band workflow is going to be really helpful to people who are operating in congested RF environments. And I can show you you're asking about the live changing of frequencies. So if you can see my screen set up here, I've got 2 microphones that are turned off. And so you can see from here, if I went to my home screen, I say, okay, let's take microphone number 1 and let's go ahead and power that on. And so you see a little spinning halo around the on button as it sends the on command.
And that's waiting for confirmation.
Yeah. And so you're going to get confirmation back from the transmitter once it turns on. Of course, you'll start to see the RSSI come up. Those blue bars is your signal strength indication. The purple dots are your Q meter, your quality meter. And then you've got a timeline here, and I can set the timeline for the quality or the RSSI. I like to use the quality meter because that's a good indication of signal to noise. So it's telling me that I've got the signal that I want, but I don't have any unwanted interference underneath it. Maybe because you could have a RSSI level that's high, but you have an unwanted interference that's causing you to have some drops in audio, right? So we'll go back to our
and notice while you're there on that screen, you had
Sure.
also the backlink RSSI meter at the top left there. That gives you an indication of the quality of your signal coming back.
Yeah, up top, it's telling me I've got a lithium-ion battery in there, that it's 88%. And then these signal bars here with the little white arrow are we're calling it NexLink, is our data link between the A20 mini transmitter and the A20 Nexus receiver.
Right.
So, and then I'll jump back into the RTSA here and show you, here's my two carriers that I've got set up. And so now if for some reason I was experiencing interference on, let's say, channel 2, I could go in here like what Paul did and say I pick a different frequency and I can hit assign. And what you'll see happen is, what do you want to assign? Well, I want to change receiver 2. Because of that link, it just turns it off on the one channel, turns back on the other. You're going to drop audio for a second as it retunes, but the A20 mini transmitter just sort of follows along with the receiver settings that I'm changing via the web interface.
That's amazing.
So imagine doing that from anywhere in the world.
Right. Yeah, and that, I think that becomes important, because the idea that you could do that from anywhere in the world, a lot of times what we like to do is have some of our technicians off-site that are paying attention to all these things, because when you're on-site, there's a lot of other things you're dealing with. And so having somebody else be able to just step in and look at things on a mixer, on a receiver, on those types of things it's a big deal.
Yeah, we've talked to some people in a corporate environment thinking about, a help desk sort of application. If you had these types of receivers in your meeting rooms, you could, from your help desk, just remote into whichever meeting room they're having trouble with, look at the RF environment, retune if necessary.
Right. Gary, I wonder if you're set up to demonstrate this as well, whereby you can switch tuning bands and basically migrate your transmitters to a new tuning band very quickly as well. And in fact, you can go back and forth between tuning bands. So where that might be useful is before a production starts, you could actually configure two separate tuning bands, one as a redundant backup should your primary tuning band with the 8 or 16 frequencies that you've allocated there and mapped there. Should there be some unexpected interference, then you could switch to another tuning band where you've mapped those same transmitters to different frequencies, and within a second have everything remapped to a totally new space in the spectrum. And you can pre-configure that before you start, and it just gives you that confidence should anything unpredictable happen. I don't know if you're in set up to do that, Gary.
Yeah, why don't I switch back over here to just the live demo of my screen. You can see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can see it great.
So if I were to go into my real-time spectrum analyzer here, and you can see we can pop that up on the fourth screen. So as you're watching your receivers, you can also see the spectrum on your display here, which I like that a lot as we're monitoring things. But bringing that over, I can tap on it to expand the spectrum all the way across the screen. And you're going to see the same spectrum analyzer that we saw on the web interface. From here, I can go to our scan mode, which it's going to tell me it's going to stop audio, because as you're getting outside of the tuning band, obviously you're not able to decode audio simultaneously. I guess we're kind of jumping in the middle of this, but I should mention that we're looking at the spectrum of our 24 meg tuning band while we're decoding all the audio from up to 16 transmitters in the same range. Right. So now I'm going to stop audio, and now you're going to see a much wider tuning range on there. In this case, it goes from 470 to 616 megahertz. That's probably a little small for you to see, but that's in yellow text on the top corners of the screen. And so if I were to move my blue cursor and say, okay, let's pick a tuning band up here, and just tap on the encoder wheel, and it'll bring me into that tuning band. Now within this tuning band, I can use the same workflow where I'm going to tap here and just assign a frequency and say that's going to go to receiver 1. And you'll see receiver 1 turn on that frequency. Yeah. And then I can tap here, and then I can assign this to receiver 2. And obviously, if you've got a more complicated RF environment, you may be wanting to use some intermod coordination software or something to do high channel counts. But for the low channel counts we're using for the demo, we're just sort of randomly picking a couple frequencies to show you how quick it is to tune it. But now that I've been in this tuning band, I've got frequencies here. As Paul said, if I, for some reason, needed to go back, maybe I'm moving between locations, I can, of course, save settings and recall settings with the Nexus. But if you're doing this kind of a fast-paced environment, say, oh, maybe I didn't want to change the tuning band. I just want to go back. I can go back here, and then I can very quickly, I can select the tuning band I was in before and go back there. And you can see it immediately remembered what frequencies I was in this tuning band and retuned my mics along with it. So I can, as long as I programmed frequencies within those tuning bands, I can move between them. And again, with that NexLink control, the microphone transmitters just follow along with the receiver as I'm moving between tuning bands.
That's amazing. We have a ton of questions
Sure.
stacking up. So this is incredible. Is there anything else, last things you want to show before we jump into the questions?
Sure. I mean, let me just run through the back panel real quick. Like Paul said, I've got a second Nexus here set up on top of the one that I'm doing the demo on. So you can see there's antenna inputs on the front, and there's also antenna inputs here on the rear, BNC for both. You can select front or rear antenna input. So depending on if you're in like a bag setup or maybe a rack setup. If you want to use a cascade option, you can do that too. You can come in the front and go out the rear. You can enable that. Both sets of antennas support bias power. So if you have a antenna that needs bias power for, like, say, a filter amplifier, if you're using a smart antenna like a WYSICOM LFA or BFA, we also support that protocol. So you can control the smart antennas from this device. So you can change filters and change gain settings on your antenna from the Nexus. Also on the back panel here, we talked a little bit about the SFP or the network options on there. So the SFP port is something you could plug in. Let's see, something like this, which is just a small fiber optic network adapter. So if you needed to connect this over fiber, you could. We've also got your traditional RJ45 copper adapters in there. The first one accepts PoE+. So PoE+ will allow you to power this unit remotely. It has to be PoE+, so that's 30 watt power. The unit max draws about 24 watts of power. In addition, we've got these DB25 connectors. The DB25 connectors are the AES59 standard, so kind of the old Tascam D88, 8 channels of analog out or 8 channels of AES digital out. It's got the antenna connections here and here for the NexLink antennas. I don't have those connected right now, but that's your 2.4 gig NexLink.
And it's worth noting, Gary, there that though we do have an optional bracket assembly which brings out those 2.4 gig SMA connectors to the front.
You can see that on the unit below. Like I have the 2.4 gig connectors right on the front panel with the bracket. So, 2.4 gig antenna. The BNC in the middle is your timecode input. So we can jam timecode to the A20 mini transmitters because we're able to locally record on an A20 mini transmitter. So that allows you to connect timecode. It sends the timecode wirelessly over the NexLink and jams to the transmitter. We've got our redundant.
And can you do that all over the world?
You can record only in the U.S. and you can transmit only in the U.S. Outside of the U.S., you can record and transmit simultaneously.
Right.
And then the DC power inputs.
Sorry, Gary, on the timecode aspect. So when the Nexus is mounted on an 8 series, it automatically sees the timecode from the 8 series itself, and you'll get a nice big display of the timecode. If you're not mounted on an 8 series, the BNC input is the timecode that's actually jammed to all the transmitters, and it's constantly basically monitoring the sync of those transmitters. So as soon as you've paired transmitters, they will all, as soon as you're in record mode, they will all jam immediately. I shouldn't use the word jam. That's freak out any RF engineers. They'll sync out the transmitters almost immediately within a few seconds. And we're constantly monitoring the drift there of each of those transmitters over the NexLink. And so it's actually a full zero drift system over however long.
That's great.
Okay.
And then you have power next to that?
Yeah, power next to it. It's 2 DC power inputs, TA4, similar to what we use on our 8 series mixer recorders. It's highest voltage takes precedence, so you can have a redundant power setup if you want. We have these 4-pin Hirose jacks on there for DC power out. If you need to power external devices. One example I've given people of that is if you wanted to set this up remotely and maybe you had an IFB transmitter that you wanted to feed, you could route Dante audio to the Nexus from that network connection, you could bring it out the analog output into an IFB transmitter and then power your IFB transmitter from that 4-pin DC jack. We've got a USB-A port on here, which is primarily just used for firmware updates and also for the initial pairing of the transmitter and the receiver. The way that the NexLink works is they need to pair up the transmitter and the receiver, and you pair up one A20 mini transmitter with one A20 Nexus receiver. And so that initial pairing is done with a USB-A to USB-C cable. And that's about it for the back panel.
That's great. That's great. Let's jump into some of the questions. Mitch, what do we got?
First one from Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area. An experienced guest would say that most sound mixers will leave any receiver in a bag cart most of the time. So then why not use the small form plug-in for RF rather than deploying the receiver closer to the Axient? We have 100 millimeter max with a category Dante.
And of course, this was asked earlier. I think that SFP kind of solves that that challenge by being able to move this. So that's what that SFP really is useful for, right? Is that I can, if you want to put this next to the, like at a stage or somewhere that's a long distance away, you can have the wireless then transmitted from there. Is that right? Is that the primary use for the SFP?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you have Dante audio plus control over fiber, and so that can go whatever distance really you require. And the power can be low. If you're connecting with fiber, then the power can be done locally.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing to note on the Ethernet configuration: each of those three network ports, the SFP and the two RG45s, can be set to control only, Dante only, or all control. So if you want to segregate your control network from your Dante network, you can.
Right. Absolutely. Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, could you see the A20 range used for concerts and live events, not just location work?
I think the one challenge would be, of course, it's primarily working with transmitters that are designed for labs, right? I mean, that's the, at the moment, or shotguns. So maybe,
exactly. At the moment, we've got transmitters that'll do 48 volt phantom power, so you could plug in a boom mic, or a live sound environment, you could plug in a test and measurement mic. Then the A20 Mini, of course, was great for putting on talent with labs, or a headset mic in that case. But in a concert environment, if you're looking for a handheld, that's something that we currently don't offer.
Yeah. Next question.
Vicky Makachor from Manila, Philippines. For multi-zone RF applications such as house-based or studio-based reality shows, can the front and rear RF inputs be configured for zone diversity?
Not exactly. You could plug in antennas to the front and antennas to the rear, and you could manually switch between them. So if you wanted to cover a larger area with two sets of antennas, you can do that, but you would have to manually switch between them. Otherwise, you would put a zoned antenna distribution system in front of this receiver to allow for multiple zones beyond that.
Next question.
Jesse Mills from San Francisco Bay Area. Which 2.54 gigahertz antennas does Sound Devices recommend for remote control?
It comes with a set of 2.4 gigahertz antennas that we showed on there. It's just kind of a simple dipole antenna, but like we said, the range on that is really very good. And so we're not recommending any changes to that. We've just got a kit to remote mount that to wherever you need to remote it.
Next question.
David Brady, New York, New York. In a city as saturated as Manhattan, what are some of the bigger challenges?
Yeah, New York City, you've probably only got one or two open DTV channels that are, very low level RF there. So that each of in the US, DTV channels are 6 megahertz. So you're trying to fit your microphones in a 6 meg chunk of spectrum. And so that's one of the reasons why those soft filters are going to be an advantage with an A20 system. We're trying to filter out all the other interference and really just narrow down on that 6 or 12 megahertz worth of spectrum that you've got clean to operate in.
And the fact that, there's that real time, really high quality RTSA built in, you can very quickly visualize where your space is and sort of zoom into that area and place your transmitters there. So it's a very quick system.
Next question.
Vicky Makachor is back again. Any plans on developing control integration with other non-SD hardwares such as GainForward and RF and power telemetry on Yamaha consoles?
Well, you've already got the benefits of the GainForward with your Yamaha consoles. You literally just go Dante directly in, and you can then just effectively get all the advantages of GainForward there by just you adjust the trim on your mixer. In terms of control directly from your mixer, we don't support that. In theory, it could be done if there was a will to do that, but I'm not sure whether that's a path we really need to go down now with this web app control and the versatility of that system to exist on any browser.
I had one audio mixer tell me he was just going to put the Nexus on his meter bridge and use it from there. But yeah, I understand that some other manufacturers do integrate control of the receiver from the mixing console. And obviously with us being part of the Audiotonics group, that's something we could consider for the future.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana asks, with the unique way you've handled RF, do you recommend just sticking with high-gain omni antennas or go directional?
I think it depends a lot on your RF environment. We're shipping 2 of those A20 Monarch antennas with the A20 Nexus, so we're giving you a wideband omni antenna that covers that full 470 to 1525 range. Outside of that, if you've got an application where you know your transmitters are always going to be in a defined area where a directional antenna could be an advantage, then definitely do that. I tend to recommend passive antennas to people first before they go to amplified antennas, just because of the filtering that's required before the amplifier to make that as reliable as the SpectraBand front end is on the A20 Nexus. So some applications you'll find a directional antenna is helpful, but start out with the Omni, see if you've got good RF gain, and then kind of go from there.
Next question.
Mickey McAchore is back. When operating multiple Nexus transmitters or receivers paired to the same transmitters, like for shows with multiple location mixers, how do the transmitters work with the NexLink controls? Which mixer controls GainForward?
Yeah, so right now you're going to have to decide which Nexus has that NexLink connection to the A20 mini transmitter. And so it's only going to be one of them if you had multiple Nexus receivers, but that's something we're looking at in the future to see if we can make that a little more streamlined for people doing reality events. I should say that the NexLink works simultaneously with a Bluetooth connection, so you can have your A20 mini connected via Bluetooth to an app on your smartphone or tablet. We've got an iOS and Android app called A20 Remote. And so if you had somebody that wanted to be able to control the transmitter, you could use the A20 Remote app and you could still maintain that NexLink connection to the receiver.
Next question.
Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. Since the unit has Dante built in, Ethernet control built in, power over Ethernet power built in, this seems like the perfect stage setup for theater. Have you tested this use case?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I think there's going to be people in theater who want to use this because you can put it just side stage or very close to talent, wherever that might be, and then route it, like you said, Dante and control to wherever that needs to be.
Next question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this one is just a little off topic, but it's one near and dear to my heart. Is there a chance the Sound Devices might create a box that just runs noise assist?
Noise assist is very popular here at office hours. Most of us rely heavily on it. Slightly.
It's certainly something we, along with 1,000 other ideas that we've discussed.
And the 500 that I send to Paul.
Daily.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here. What is the application for timecode on the wireless receiver?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that, but because you're able to record, as we said, you can do record only. So, I mean, maybe you have a scene where someone's getting in a car and driving away and you need to record audio and bring that to post. But because you're having the ability to record, and then if you're outside the US, you can record and transmit simultaneously, you need to connect the timecode signal to the A20 mini transmitter so that you've got that timecode synced up. And so it's just easy to connect it to the BMC on the back. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning with that particular workflow where you are using multiple transmitters to record that, once they're all synced up from the Nexus timecode, you go ahead and record. And at the end of the day, you can bring all the files from those transmitters into your computer. You can do that via just plugging the USB-C from the transmitter directly into a computer, or you can use our Power Station 8M 8-slot box, which allows you to connect 8 transmitters at the same time to transfer all of those files in one step. And then we offer this free application called SD Utility, which can bring all those individual files in from each transmitter. And by virtue of the fact they all have exactly the same timecode, we have essentially a tool which merges all of those files into one poly file, and you can choose a select timecode range that you want to bring in the app, and it'll basically just spit out a poly file with, it could be a 16-channel poly wave file, which then you can then deliver to post to make it easier for post. You can even use the sound report .csv file that we generate in an 8 series to automatically conform the those files to match the exact same files on your 8 series if you're using an 8 series recorder.
And Paul, we lost your video there for a second.
Yeah, sorry. So that's like a middleman bit of software which can be used so that you can deliver exactly what post wants.
Go ahead, Courtney. You had something.
Yeah, a related question. Can you dump the SD card recordings wirelessly from each transmitter into the receiver or into the Dante network so that you can get them into a computer without having to retrieve the cards themselves from the transmitters?
We don't have that feature, no. Not to say it's not doable, but yeah. Right now, there's not even a removable SD card. With the A20 minis, you have to connect via USB-C or via this power station 8-slot unit. The A10, the original A10TX transmitter does have a removable micro SD card, but I know what you're asking for. You don't want to have to go through that process. I get it.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany asked, are there plans for transmitters and mobile receivers for IFB use?
It's another one of those things that we are discussing constantly internally. We realize that's a missing part of our portfolio. And of course, where we're going wirelessly, we want to look at every aspect of that.
Next question.
Jesse Mills from San Francisco Bay Area asked, could one change the modulation from standard to long range per receiver channel?
Yes, you sure can. It supports standard and long range on each receive channel on the A20 Nexus. And both the A20 Mini and the A10TX support the standard and long range modulation schemes.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood, California, and right here in our panel, does increasing the number of receive channels through license unlock increase the latency of all channels? If so, how much?
Nope, there's no change in latency regardless of how many channels you're receiving.
Next question.
Mickey Makachor is back. Just because we have you here, when are you bringing back the 970 with 128 channels of Dante and recording this time?
I feel like Paul gets that question every day, don't you?
Yeah.
We love that. I literally had a show where we had to find a 970. We were like, I got to find a 970 from some rental firm. It's such a great product.
Believe us, we didn't really want to discontinue the 970 at all. We were forced into it due to component issues and supply chains and all of that stuff. But we do know how popular the 970 is, and it's a product we would absolutely love to do as well. And I can't really say much more than that.
Next question.
Next one in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And I think we've answered this already, but can you demo us the real-time RF monitor?
Yeah, I think we saw this. This question was asked a little while ago. They were all stacking up. So we definitely got to see that. It was amazing. Next question.
Mickey Makachor is back. Total system latency from wireless transmitter to Dante receiver.
It's going to depend on your Dante settings in that case. I will say if you're using the long range modulation, that's about 3.9 milliseconds of latency. If you're using standard modulation, it's 2 milliseconds of latency. But then, add on whatever your Dante network delay is.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has this question. With RF scanning monitoring in the receiver, could you see the A20 Nexus being a formidable competitor to Shure's Axient range, for example, in the live event market?
I mean, possibly. We talked about some of the things in the concert market that we need to do, but I think, I've used the Axient system quite a bit, and I'd say that it's a definitely similar product.
Yeah, I mean, up until now, the Axient has been basically, that's what I asked for when I'm renting out gear. I was like, I want an Axient. for those things, and it just takes up so much. I mean, compared to this, and I do a lot of events with 6 to 8 people. That's kind of like a thing that's very common for me. And so the idea of having this, I just keep on looking at when I looked at this, I was like, the idea of having this little box that does all that transmission for me is super exciting. Yeah. Next question.
Paul Terry Wallace from Austin, Texas asks, do you think the mini DIN connectors might be a mistake? They really don't hold very well.
Which
I'm
one?
not sure what mini DIN
Is
he's
he
talking
talking
about.
the TA4s or the Heroes outputs? Which connectors?
I think
the power inputs or the DC output?
It might even be the antenna connections that he's referring to. And I think it's just really, I mean, that's pretty standard within the audio industry. I mean, those connections are what everybody uses.
Yeah, they're all latching connections as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the last question for the hour, unless we get some more in there. Go ahead. Next question.
Mickey Makachor asked, how has the preamp design experience of SD integrated into the transmitter preamp of the Astral line?
Yeah, very heavily. I mean, the reason that we've got GainForward is because of a patented Sound Devices technology for doing that capture. So we're able to, as Paul mentioned before, capture 130 dB of dynamic range on that on the LEMO input on the A20 mini transmitter. And so,
yeah, very much stem from the mix pre line, which you're all familiar with. So yeah, multi-stage ADC, really super low noise mic preamp stage.
And one more question, last question.
From Douglas Carmichael, what durability issues have you had with the touchscreen displays?
Well, they are actually Gorilla Glass displays, so they're very, very robust. We have found a screen protector as well, should people be really paranoid and want to use a screen protector. It's actually, it's one for the Apple Watch, isn't it, Gary, if I remember rightly, that you can get them from anywhere.
The 44 millimeter Apple Watch screen protectors fit those screens nice. You just need 4 of them.
But these screens are very solid. I mean, if you are familiar with a mix pre, then you know that they're not really subject to easy failure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. And I was so excited about this product. I'm just very excited about this product. As someone who does a lot of the wireless in the group of the number of receivers or transmitters that you're putting this out for, I just think it's going to match up with what we're doing really, really well. So just really, really excited to see it. Thank you so much on such short notice for Paul and Gary to come and join us and answer all those questions so well. I really feel like it's a real honor for us to have you guys here the day after you announce it and to really dig into the details. And so we really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Alex. I mean, for you to sort of like arrange it so quickly, it's sort of obviously we're very proud to be able to jump in there that quick, especially after we're literally shipping today, by the way. So,
that's great. You're shipping in the same week that you announced it? Amazing.
Well, that's what we like to try and do, if possible. Exactly. You know, we don't like to deal with vaporware.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And thanks again, Gary, as well. It's really, really great to have you here. I think it's the first time we've had you on the show. Paul's been here a couple times, but it's really, really great. Hopefully we'll be able to, we might try to drag you in to talk about wireless if you're open to it.
Yeah, anytime.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. And thanks to the producers for all the great questions. Fantastic questions. Really dug into the details of this great product and for the first hour. Thanks to our panelists, of course. We can't do this without you. And a lot of great conversation, great answers. And thanks to the incredible crew. There's a crew 7 days a week that puts this together on the back end. This doesn't just happen inside of Zoom. Like there's people that are editing and doing the managing the audio and people greeting you when you come in and all those things. And all those people are volunteers. And we really appreciate all the time that everyone puts into it. So thank you so much. And now we're going to jump into After Hours. This is the whisper room. See, once it goes dark, we don't want to talk too loud, but I'm really
testing the dynamic range of our not that thing.
Yeah, exactly. But
or the wireless preamps with whispers.
See how well our noise assist works on our Mix Pre 3s. That's what you don't know. I think Paul knows, but Gary knows. Like half of our panelists all have Mix Pre's. Not that we're addicted. We really like our noise assist, though.
I think I'm going to sell my car and buy one of those.
I know. That thing's worth a lot more than my car. That costs a lot more than my car.
Engine price starts at $14,900 or something, right?
But the car doesn't generate